Things get even worse for the Vancouver Canucks as a former player speaks out on the JT Miller and Pettersson situation, and this is not what Canucks fans want to hear. We're going to break all this down and more later on this episode. Before we get into that, I just want to say Happy New Year's to everyone watching, and hopefully 2025 is an awesome year for you guys. But with that, Griffin, let's just hop straight into the first topic today, which is the fact that Brad Richardson went on to a podcast speaking out on the JT Miller situation with Elias Pettersson, and things are getting a little tricky. He went on to say, I love JT, he's an effing animal, but even told him, you're too hard on the kid. Now looking at this is something that you don't want to see from a veteran that was on this team a few years ago, and things seem to keep getting worse for the Canucks as tension grows with the two players. Now looking at Elias Pettersson, he hasn't been his former self the past two seasons, but he has been productive. 28 points in the past 34 games, 10 goals, 18 assists. He's a -3 playing 19 minutes time on ice. Just looking at that first quote, Griffin, what was your initial thoughts on hearing this?
Well, JT Miller, as we've known and said on this show before, he is the ultimate version of a competitor where he hates to lose more than he loves to win. And that's where he's saying right here, he's an animal. He's just a bar none competitor and wants to bring out the best in everybody. And he takes all the blame on himself when they lose and takes none of the credit when they win. That's the mark of a leader as well. We've said it numerous times. Having other players speak out on this and saying the exact same thing about him just goes to show the caliber of player that he is. However, in regards to the Elias Pettersson situation that we've seen and how it's unfolded, how it's been handled even as far back as October when these guys got into a scuffle at practice, at that time we were thinking, okay, maybe that was something where the management was saying, hey, do something to get PD going because there's all this noise surrounding him. When there at the time there was a lot on social media where PD had to delete social media at the time. And then we go into a few months later where Miller takes an indefinite leave from the team. And then we hear all these rumors stoked by Elliot Friedman, who led to a suspension on the matter, saying that it was because of their rift that he was leaving. So there's been a lot of noise so much around them this season and around them recently, where it seems like we could potentially see one of them leave, and you'd hate to see it. But having a former player come out and say this about a guy where he respects him so much, he loves him so much, but you got to lay off a little bit. We've seen how PD excels more when the noise is not focused on him as much and he's able to kind of tune it out. Where if Miller's constantly on him, it's not easy for him to do that. And I think that's what he has to do going forward to make sure that, hey, just show that you're there and giving tough love here and there, but not constantly on his ass all the time, making sure that he can just excel when he has a little bit of leeway going.
And looking at this, there was another quote coming from Brad where he said, listen, JT, he's the man, but there's a lot of tension and something's got to give. I'm not saying you're going to love every guy on your team. It helps, but something's got to give there. We'll see. So obviously the players know, management knows, JT Miller and Pettersson know this as well. This tension is something that cannot keep going within this organization. These are the two star players, and Elias Pettersson putting up 20 points in his 34 games this year. We've seen him out with an injury. He's still 26 years old, and this is your franchise center. Then it leads into your number two center and probably your number two option as a forward, putting up 24 points in 26 games. JT Miller and Pettersson need to figure out how to coexist on this team. It cannot just be a consistent rift between two of your top players going into every season, going into the postseason, and everything in between. Do you think there's something they can do to maybe fix this, or do you think there truly might be a trade on the horizon?
I think there's always something they can do because at the end of the day, when we're talking about trading, people are throwing it around so lightly. Oh, it's so easy to move Pedersen. It's so easy to move JT Miller. When they're not realizing that these are two of the four superstars of this team. Last season, we've seen what they've been able to do and what this team can do when they are clicking on all cylinders. JT Miller getting 100 points last season. Pedersen nearly getting back to that back-to-back 100-point season, and all the other ones as well. So just saying that it's so easy to trade them like that almost feels like a gut punch, or just taking away what they've mean to this team and what they've meant to this team over the past few seasons. Yes, this season hasn't gone ideally how they want it to go, but there is always something that you can do. There's something that Quinn Hughes probably has to do to step in and say, hey, boys, set your side, put your swords away, and let's get back on the ice and get back to scoring goals. Let's keep putting that red light on. Let's keep hearing "Don't You Forget About Me" at Rogers Arena. We need to get something clicking, especially at home. Get the fans back on our side so that they're not worrying about the noise. This is something where, hey, It's bigger than you two. It's bigger than the names on your back. It's more about the crest on the front of your jersey and the fact that you guys both have an A on your jersey. You are two of the leaders of this team. Start acting like it and put this aside.
Because looking at the team right now with Elias Pettersson out, with Hughes out, it doesn't look great. If you were to move on hypothetically from either JT Miller or Petey, you would need to fill out something on this back end. But even then, if you traded Petey from this lineup, this is what the forward core would look like. And in my opinion, this is not a Stanley Cup winning core. You need a number one center. You need a number two center. And with Miller or Petey out of this lineup, you'd have to step into a guy like Suter, Bluger, Sasson, which are great complementary pieces, but maybe not a top six guy to help this team win a Stanley Cup. Center depth, defense, these are two of the most important things going into the playoffs, and the Canucks really need to look into this. I mean, looking at just yesterday when we talked about the fact that Allvin has already said, do I want to see if I could shake things up and send a message to the players? Sometimes that is what's needed. It seems like management knows that something has to happen here. Something needs to give at some point with this team. If that's a trade, if that's going out and acquiring more players, something needs to give. And we've seen him also go out and say on just that Elias Pettersson needs to step up. Life gets harder. You really need to accomplish anything. You're not even halfway there to winning the Stanley Cup. And obviously the mental part comes there too. Suddenly you feel the pressure. Looking at this, would you go out and just make a trade like last year where they went and got two guys like Lindholm and Sidorov by giving out prospects or picks? Or do you think they truly just need to go out and make a giant splash and maybe acquire a new superstar for this team?
If they're going to move on from Pettersson or Miller, you have to get a superstar for that. There is no question about it. But what I would like to see them do is that first one, like you said. I think, like we've talked about many times on this show, that the writing has kind of been on the wall as far as Niels Höglander is concerned. So I really like the idea of trading him away and a few draft picks or maybe one prospect in exchange for a really reliable winger that can be on that top six and really bolster it down so that we have a very confident top six that we're not having to keep cycling guys in and out of, trying to see what can stick. We can have someone very consistently there that is reliable, that can play with Pettersson if we don't, with not trading him, and make sure that, hey, if you have Connor Garland with him, Pettersson, and someone else who's very reliable, that's kind of like a Jake DeBrusk guy is on that first line, that's someone you can go and get on a cap-friendly deal and go for looking for those diamonds in the rough. That's what Rutherford and Allvin have been so great at, is finding guys. I know, like we talked about with the pool party yesterday, where fans kind of ripped us apart for our take on it, where we said how he would fit into this lineup so well. It's not a matter of what they've been able to do in the past. It's a matter of what Allvin, Rutherford, and Tocchet can bring out of these guys. Like we've talked about, where so many players that nobody even knew about. Nobody knew about Connor Garland really across the NHL, aside from Canucks fans, heading into this season. But Canucks fans knew what he did last season. So what he's doing this season is coming as no surprise. But to the rest of the league, they're going, wow, this guy's really coming out of nowhere. No, he hasn't. He's been here all along. It's just now you're finally paying attention. And that is definitely the case in what the Canucks could do if they go out and make a trade for this. You don't have to get a guy who's a certified superstar for Höglander and a prospect or a pick, but you can go out and get a guy who's like Jake DeBrusk, where on another team, he's a really good bottom six guy, but on the Canucks, he can be a really great top six, because some guys like Jake DeBrusk, they're a victim of circumstance where they're on a top loaded team and they're really great and they're stuck on the bottom six when they're really deserving of a top six spot.
And that's the biggest thing. I think you do go out and move on from a guy like Höglander. You add a prospect, you could add a pick, but I think you keep this core together for as long as you possibly can. We've seen it work in the past. We've seen them take the Oilers to Game 7 last year, just last season in the playoffs. Something's going to give, but what are your guys' thoughts on this? What's your thoughts on Brad Richardson just coming out and speaking on the JT Miller situation? What's your thoughts on maybe a trade coming? Who would you like to acquire around the NHL? Let us know down in the comments. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode, so keep your eye out for that. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Griffin, and take care.